Hello, today let us look at accrued expenses. And first thing, recall that in accrual accounting, we recognize expenses when as they are incurred, okay? So the question is, what happens when an expense has been incurred, but it has not yet been paid, okay? So you have incurred an expense, but you're yet to pay for it. Remember, in accrual accounting, we recognize expenses and revenue when they are incurred and earned, not when just cash is moving, okay? So even without payment being processed, we need to recognize the expense when it has been incurred, okay? So once that happens, we need to recognize these as what we call, this is what we call accrued expense, okay? Accrued expense is basically an expense that has been incurred, but it has not yet been paid for, and an invoice has not yet been issued, but you have already incurred that expense, okay? So recall, we talked about also prepaid expense in our previous video. In our previous video, we talked about prepaid expense. You can check it out, okay? So basically, these are two items that are opposite of each other. And accrued expense is basically categorized as a current liability. Why? You have incurred something, meaning you have already received the benefit of you've already received the benefit, but you've not paid for it. So that is a current liability. And basically, because it's something that you should be settling within a period of 12 months, then it is a current liability, okay? And for prepaid expense, it's where now you have paid for something, but you have not yet incurred it, meaning you're yet to receive the benefits of what you have paid for. And this is classified as a current liability. So basically, these two items, they are opposite of each other. One is you have incurred the cost, which is accrued expense. You have incurred the cost, but you've incurred the expense, but you have not yet paid for that expense. For prepaid is you have paid for it, as the word says, prepaid, you've paid for it, but you're yet to receive the benefit of that that you have paid for. This is a current liability, and prepaid expense is a current asset, okay? So let us look at a practical example on how we do the recording, or we go about accrued expense, okay? So we have KM traders use this amount of units of water during the month of May, okay? And the total cost of the water was approximated to cost Kenyan shillings 5,000. Remember, when someone has not invoiced you something, you don't know exactly what's the cost, but you can approximately look. In a month, I usually pay this amount of water. Maybe, like, say, when you're dealing with your landlord, maybe, for example, mostly someone pays for the rent, and then they pay for other bills, separate water bills, okay? But approximately I usually pay 1,900 or 2,000, sometimes 2,100. So you can decide to be paying, let's say, for example, 2,000. I'm giving you a scenario of how the approximation is done, okay? So you can just be knowing this. Approximately, I usually incur a cost of 2,000. That is maybe when you want to pay before you are billed. But now in this situation, you need to be able to, we want to recognize an accrued expense. We don't have to pay it now. You've not yet been invoiced, okay? So we just do an approximation of this water bill to be 5,000, depending on our historical records in the past, okay? And our usage as well, okay? So in June, KM traders received now the water bill, now the invoice of amount 5,300. Now they have received the actual cost that they have incurred on water during the month of May. But when was this water incurred? When was it incurred actually? The cost was incurred in May. Okay, it was incurred in May because that is when the water was used. So they then paid for this amount the following week, now that they have received the invoice. How do we go about recording this? So first, at the end of the month of May, we need to recognize the expense because it has already been incurred. So we come, and as of end of May, we have approximated. So we're going to call it utility. Let's call it utility expense. Utility expense. And we have account, and we have approximated it to have an amount of 5,000, the cost to be 5,000. That is the cost we are approximating we have incurred already by using the water that we have used during that period. Okay, so then we also need to recognize a liability because we are yet to pay. We have an obligation to pay for this water. We have already used it, so we have a liability to pay. Remember, dealer, as always, always have this in mind on when we credit and when we debit accounts. Okay, this is on the left, on the right side of the equation is where we have liability. Okay, you can refer to a previous video I have done on how to know when we are debiting to increase an account and when we debit actually to decrease that account. Okay, so when we want to increase a liability account, we credit it. Okay, because it is on the right side of the accounting equation. Okay, you can check the detailed video to guide you. Okay, so we credit here, we credit accrued utilities account, accrued utility account. Okay, an amount of 5,000. So by the end of as at end of May, we have given room for this expense that we have incurred. Remember, we should always recognize an expense when it has been incurred, not when payment has been done. Okay, so what happens once we receive this invoice of 5,300? Now what happens? The first thing is, now you have to record the actual utility expense, and the actual utility expense is 5,300. Okay, and now you're yet to pay. As at this point, let's record before you pay. You need then to record another liability, which is utility payable account. We are just recording that we have a payable that we are yet to pay of an amount 5,300. Okay, I need to do okay, I'll just do it below here to show the T account. Let's focus on the T account and the T for utility expense. Okay, so here we have debit and we have credit. Okay, so we have initially we have debited 5,000, and then now we have debited the actual cost of 5,300. If you could sum these, would find that our utility expense is 10,300. Is that correct? No, it is not correct. Why? Because our utility expense is basically 5,300. Okay, so we need to reduce our accrued liability and also now reduce our utility expense that we had recorded in the previous period. So now we record, because we have now recorded the actual record. Okay, the actual cost that we incurred. So if we come and debit accrued liability, what do? We are reducing it because it is a liability account. When you debit a liability account, you reduce it. So we are going to reduce it by an amount of 5,000. Okay, sorry. And to reduce an expense account, remember, when you are looking at dealer, this is expense. It is on the left side of the accounting equation. And when you want to reduce the accounts on the left side of the accounting equation, what do? You credit them. So we credit here utility expense. We credit utility expense, an amount of 5,000. Okay, so once we do that, we are going to have, if we put this in our T account, means we're going to have now a credit of 5. You're going to have a credit of 5,000. What will that bring? 5,000. And here we are going to have 10. Okay, 10,300. So meaning our balance of this will be 5,300. Okay, so you see it has finally come to the true actual cost incurred during the period of May, which is 5,300. Okay, so now what happens when we pay? What happens when we pay? We process that payment, so we need to reduce now our utility payable account, which is a liability, another liability account. So a liability account, what do? You debit to reduce it by an amount of 5,300. Then what are you going to do? You're going to credit. You are going to credit cash. You're going to credit cash account an amount of 5,300, because a cash account is an asset account, and because you're paying out, you're going to have to credit. So basically, this is how we basically, as at the end period of May, we needed to make sure we recognize there is a net spend, of utility expense that we have incurred during the period, even though we've not yet been billed. The invoice has not yet been issued. We still need to recognize that expense, okay? Because there is revenue that has been generated during that period. When people are using that water, it's an operation expense. Let's say water is being used to make tea and everything. It's still supporting the business. Okay, so remember, we usually make sure we record expenses in the same period that the revenues we have are the revenue that has been earned in that period. We also record the expenses that have been incurred during that period. Okay, so that is it for accrued expenses for today. Next, we are going to look at accrued revenue, and also we shall look at deferred revenue.